I had never expected my life to turn into a soap opera overnight. 1 minute, I was Lily Brooks, the hard-working assistant to Lucas Turner, the cold, infamously unattainable CEO of Turner Enterprises. The next minute, I was Lily Brooks, his legally wedded wife. It all started because of a phone call. "Miss Brooks," the HR director said crisply, "please report to the executive floor. Mr. Turner needs to see you." My heart jumped into my throat. Lucas Turner rarely summoned anyone personally. And when he did, it usually wasn't good news. Was I getting fired? Had he finally lost patience with my clumsy coffee deliveries and scatterbrained reports? I smoothed my skirt, adjusted my hair, and marched upstairs. The executive floor was another world, silent, immaculate, intimidating. I knocked gently on Lucas's office door. "Come in," came the curt reply. I pushed the door open. Lucas Turner sat behind his massive desk, reviewing a document with his usual icy expression. He didn't even look up. "You're late," he said. "I'm sorry, Mr. Turner," I blurted automatically. He tossed the document aside and fixed me with his sharp, steel gray eyes. "I have a proposition," he said bluntly. I blinked. "A proposition? Marry me," he said. Just like that. Flat, cold, emotionless. Like he was discussing the weather. I stood there, stunned. Had I misheard? "Excuse me?" I croaked. Lucas leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "You need money. I need a wife. Simple transaction." I gaped at him. How did he even know I needed money? Sure, I was behind on rent and living on instant noodles. But it wasn't like I wore a "broke and desperate" sign on my forehead. "I don't understand," I stammered. He sighed, as if my slowness physically pained him. "My grandmother is ill. Her last wish is to see me married before she passes. I don't have time for dating. And I trust you enough not to cause a scandal." I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. Like a stunned goldfish. "You'll get a generous compensation," Lucas added, as if reading my mind. "A fully furnished apartment. A car. Enough money to live comfortably for years." It sounded like a dream. Or a scam. Probably both. "But, why me?" I asked weakly. He gave me a long, assessing look. "You're ordinary." Ouch. No hesitation. No sugarcoating. Just straight up verbal slap. "You're not ambitious enough to use me. And not stupid enough to embarrass me." He continued smoothly. Double ouch. I swallowed my pride. After all, it wasn't like he was wrong. I was the definition of ordinary. Average looks. Average grades. Average everything. The perfect nobody. Lucas pushed a thin folder across the desk. Inside, a prenuptial agreement, marriage license applications, and a non-disclosure form. All already filled out. All missing only my signature. My hands shook as I picked up the pen. Was I seriously considering this? Was I really about to sell myself into a paper marriage with my cold, terrifying boss? But then I thought about my overdue rent. About my sick mother back home. About the collection agencies breathing down my neck. And I signed. The moment my pen left the page, Lucas reached over, grabbed the documents, and stood up. "Good," he said briskly. "We'll register the marriage tomorrow morning." I blinked. That fast? I'm not a patient man. "Miss Brooks." "Right. Of course not." The next morning, we went to the city hall together. Lucas wore a tailored black suit, looking like he stepped out of a luxury magazine. I wore my best, and only, decent dress. We stood side by side in front of the registrar. The clerk peered at us over her glasses. "Suspicious. Relationship status?" she asked. Lucas didn't hesitate. "Deeply in love." I choked on my own saliva. The clerk raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She stamped the forms with a heavy thud and handed us the marriage certificate. "Congratulations. You may now ruin each other's lives legally." Outside City Hall, Lucas turned to me. "We'll have a dinner with my grandmother tonight," he said. "After that, you can move into the new apartment." "Understood," I said stiffly. He looked at me for a long moment. Then, and I must have imagined this, the corners of his mouth twitched slightly. Almost, like a smile. "Relax," he said. "It's just a show." "Sure, just a show." So why did my heart feel like it was about to beat out of my chest? That evening, Lucas Turner picked me up right after work. He drove a low-key black Bentley, nothing flashy. but expensive enough to make my heart skip. The ride to his grandmother's house was silent, awkward. I fidgeted with my seatbelt, sneaking glances at Lucas from the corner of my eye. He was perfectly composed, like this was just another business meeting. Meanwhile, I was having a full-blown internal panic attack. How were we supposed to act like a real couple? I barely knew anything about him beyond, likes black coffee, and hates small talk. We need a backstory, I blurted. Lucas arched an eyebrow without taking his eyes off the road. Backstory? Yeah, how we met, how we fell in love, you know, normal couple stuff. He smirked faintly. You think my grandmother cares about the details? I shrank into my seat. Probably not. Still, I wanted to be prepared. If this blew up in our faces, it wouldn't be because of me. 20 minutes later, we pulled up in front of a sprawling, elegant mansion. A butler in a sharp uniform opened the door for us. Inside, the house was warm and cozy, a stark contrast to Lucas's icy demeanor. Photos lined the walls. Lucas as a boy. Lucas graduating college. Lucas with his grandmother at some gala event. The woman herself was waiting for us in the sitting room. She was tiny and regal, with sharp eyes and silver hair swept into a neat bun. Her name was Madame Turner, and she exuded the kind of presence that made you stand up straighter without realizing it. When she saw Lucas, her face lit up. Lucas, she said warmly. Then her gaze shifted to me. And this must be Lily? Her smile softened. I stepped forward, nerves jangling. Yes, ma'am, it's a pleasure to meet you. She studied me for a moment, then chuckled. No need to be so formal. You're family now. Family. The word hit me like a brick. Dinner was nerve-wracking. Madame Turner peppered us with questions. How we met, how long we had been dating, what we loved most about each other. I opened my mouth, scrambling for a plausible lie, but Lucas beat me to it. We met during a charity event. He said smoothly. She was organizing volunteers. I was impressed by her dedication. He glanced at me, a signal. I nodded quickly. Yeah, I spilled a whole tray of drinks on him. I added. Madame Turner laughed. And you still liked her? Lucas's lips quirked. She was memorable. The old woman beamed, clearly buying every word. You must take good care of my grandson, she said, patting my hand. He works too hard. Someone needs to make sure he eats properly and gets enough rest. I will, I promised. Across the table, Lucas raised an eyebrow, amused. After dinner, we moved to the living room for tea. Madame Turner insisted we sit together on the couch, close together. Lucas draped an arm around my shoulders without hesitation. Casual, natural, like he'd done it 1,000 times before. Meanwhile, I sat stiffly, feeling like a cardboard cutout. Relax, I told myself. Relax. But how could I relax when Lucas smelled so good, clean soap? Warm skin, expensive cologne. I was going to die. Madame Turner seemed pleased. She chatted happily about the wedding ceremony she wanted to throw, already planning everything in her head. Lucas squeezed my shoulder subtly, a silent warning. Don't freak out. Just smile and nod. I smiled so hard my cheeks hurt. When it was finally time to leave, Madame Turner hugged me tightly. Thank you, Lily, she whispered, for making him smile again. I froze. I glanced at Lucas. Was that true? Had he really smiled more because of me? In the car ride back, silence settled between us again. But this time, it wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful. I stared out the window, heart pounding. Had I crossed some invisible line tonight? Was I getting too caught up in the fantasy? I sneaked a glance at Lucas. He was focused on driving, his profile sharp under the dashboard lights. So calm, so cold, untouchable. I sighed quietly and looked away. It's just a show, Lily. Don't forget, don't fall for your boss. Too late. Moving into the new apartment felt surreal. It was in a luxury building downtown, floor-to-ceiling windows, sleek modern furniture, and a view of the city skyline that could make a grown man cry. Lucas Turner handed me the keys with his usual cold efficiency. You'll live here for the duration of the marriage, he said. I've arranged everything you might need. I stepped inside, my mouth falling open. Everything was immaculate. Minimalist decor, muted colors, expensive touches in every corner, and yet somehow cozy. There were even fresh flowers on the kitchen counter. I blinked. Had he ordered those? Or had someone else staged it? Either way, it was unsettlingly thoughtful. Thank you, I said quietly. Lucas nodded once, like he'd just closed another business deal. I'll stop by occasionally, he added, to maintain appearances. Of course. Appearances. Nothing more. I wandered through the apartment after he left, touching things just to make sure they were real. A walk-in closet bigger than my old studio apartment, a bathroom with a soaking tub deep enough to drown my problems, in a bed so massive it looked like a small island. My own personal slice of paradise, courtesy of a marriage contract. The first night felt strange. Sleeping in a stranger's bed. Living a stranger's life. The second night was even stranger. Because Lucas showed up. No warning. No text. Just appeared at the door with a bag of groceries like it was the most natural thing in the world. I thought you might forget to eat, he said simply, stepping inside. I stood there, barefoot in pajama shorts and a messy bun, gaping like an idiot. He wore casual jeans and a black sweater, looking ridiculously attractive for someone buying spinach and instant noodles. You cook? I blurted. Lucas arched an eyebrow. No, you cook, I supervise. I wanted to throw the nearest pillow at him. Still, I obeyed, partly because I was terrified of angering him, partly because cooking together sounded suspiciously like something real couples did. While I chopped vegetables, Lucas leaned against the counter, scrolling through his phone. At one point, he reached over and tucked a stray hair behind my ear. Casually, like it was nothing, but my heart nearly exploded. We ate dinner sitting side by side on the couch, shoulders almost touching. Lucas watched the news, disinterested. I watched him, mortified. I couldn't remember the last time I ate a meal with someone like this. Quiet, comfortable, like we belonged. Afterward, he insisted on doing the dishes. I tried to protest. It felt wrong to let a billionaire CEO scrub plates, but he ignored me. You cooked, I clean, he said simply. Division of labor. So normal, so painfully normal. Before leaving, he paused at the door. You're doing well, he said abruptly. I blinked. Was that a compliment? From Lucas Turner? I managed a wobbly smile. Thanks, boss. He gave me a look. I'm your husband now, he said coolly. Call me properly. I nearly choked. After he left, I collapsed onto the couch, covering my face with a pillow. This was dangerous. This wasn't just playing house. Not anymore, because somewhere between chopping vegetables and washing dishes, I'd started wishing it was real. The next week passed in a strange, hazy blur. Lucas didn't come by the apartment every night, but when he did, he brought groceries, small household items, even a fluffy throw blanket because he said the couch looked cold. He never stayed long, sometimes barely an hour, but each visit left a deeper mark than I wanted to admit. I was getting used to him, to his quiet presence, to his subtle care, and it terrified me. One Friday evening, my coworker Mia invited me to grab drinks after work. At first, I hesitated. Lucas might show up unexpectedly. But then I remembered, he wasn't my real husband. I didn't need permission. Besides, if I didn't go out and live a little, I'd go insane. The bar was lively, packed with office workers blowing off steam. Mia and a few others dragged me into their group, chattering, laughing, ordering fruity cocktails with ridiculous names. Halfway through my second drink, someone tapped my shoulder. It was Ethan, a guy from the finance department. Easy smile, slightly messy hair, classic office flirt. Hey, Mrs. Turner, he teased, raising his glass. Care to honor me with a dance? I laughed. Who told you about that nickname? He winked. Everyone knows you're the mysterious Mrs. Turner, the office legend. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. Lucas Turner. My stomach flipped. I stepped away from the group to answer. Where are you? He asked. Voice low and clipped. I'm out, I said, suddenly feeling guilty for no reason. Just having drinks with coworkers. A pause. Where exactly? I glanced around. Bailey's on 5th. Another pause. Stay there, he said. Click. He hung up. I returned to the group, plastering on a smile. Mia handed me another drink. Your mystery husband? Yeah, I muttered, sipping. She giggled. Tell him to come. We want to meet the man who stole Lily Brooks's heart. I laughed awkwardly. If only they knew. 15 minutes later, Lucas walked in, Even in casual clothes, dark jeans, gray sweater, he stood out like a wolf among puppies. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. Lucas scanned the room once, locked eyes with me, and strode over. Without a word, he wrapped an arm around my waist. Possessive, territorial. My breath caught. "Hi," Ethan said nervously, holding out a hand. "You must be Lily's husband." Lucas barely glanced at him. Then he did something that shocked everyone, including me. He pulled me closer and kissed the top of my head. Casually, intimately, as if we'd done it 100 times before. I stiffened. My coworkers squealed. Lucas finally deigned to shake Ethan's hand, briefly, like he was touching a germ. "Thanks for keeping my wife entertained," he said coolly. Ethan laughed awkwardly and backed away. Lucas leaned down and murmured against my ear, "Time to go." It wasn't a suggestion. In the car, the tension was thick enough to choke on. I fidgeted with the hem of my skirt. "Sorry," I mumbled. "I didn't think you'd mind." Lucas didn't respond. He stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. Finally, he said, "Next time, let me know." I nodded quickly. "Of course. I didn't mean to. And don't dance with other men." I blinked. I didn't dance with anyone. Still, his voice was sharp, rougher than usual. Silence. Heavy. Awkward. Then, softly, he added, "I don't like sharing." My heart slammed against my ribs. Sharing? What was he talking about? We weren't even real, were we? I turned to him, but he kept his eyes on the road. Expression unreadable. I bit my lip. Maybe it was just part of the act, maybe he was overcompensating in public for appearances. But a small, foolish part of me whispered, maybe not. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Replay the scene at the bar over and over. The possessive arm, the kiss on my head. The low, dangerous voice telling another man to back off. It wasn't just for show anymore. At least not for me. Over the next few days, Lucas Turner acted different. Subtle, but unmistakable. He started texting me randomly, short messages. Nothing mushy, but enough to make my heart race. Open black lens bracket, eat lunch. Close black lens bracket, open black lens bracket, get some sleep. Close black lens bracket, open black lens bracket, it's cold outside. Wear a coat. Close black lens bracket. Boss-like on the surface, but underneath, something warmer. Something real. At work, he grew even colder toward others, sharp, efficient, merciless. But whenever his eyes landed on me, the frost melted just a little. Not that anyone else noticed. Only me. And that made it so much worse. I tried to remind myself, this is a contract. This is not real. But then he would do something ridiculous. Like casually handing me my favorite coffee without asking. Or adjusting my chair so I wouldn't strain my back. Little things that no cold-hearted CEO should care about. And my stupid heart would betray me all over again. Then came the charity gala. A massive corporate event. Turner Enterprises was one of the sponsors. So naturally, Lucas had to attend, and as his wife, so did I. The night of the gala, Lucas showed up at my apartment. Impeccably dressed in a tailored black tuxedo. He looked lethal. I, on the other hand, wore a modest navy gown, simple, elegant, unremarkable, exactly the way a temporary wife should dress. Or so I thought. When Lucas saw me, he stopped in the doorway. For a moment, he just stared. Then he said, voice low, "You look beautiful." I blinked. Did I hear that right? But before I could process it, he offered his arm. "Shall we?" The gala was overwhelming. Flashing cameras, glittering chandeliers, celebrities and tycoons everywhere. Lucas held me close, his hand firm at the small of my back. Everywhere we went, people stared, whispered. I could practically hear them. "That's Lucas Turner's wife. She's so ordinary. Maybe it's a marriage of convenience." They weren't wrong, but their judgment still stung. At one point, Lucas excused himself to greet an important investor. I was left standing alone near the refreshment table, feeling awkward. That's when Brian Holt, the charming, obnoxious heir to a rival company, appeared. "Mrs. Turner," he drawled, flashing a dazzling smile. "Finally got a chance to meet you." I smiled politely. "Nice to meet you." "You know," he said, stepping a little too close. "I always wondered what kind of woman could tame Lucas Turner." I laughed awkwardly. Brian leaned in, dropping his voice. Tell me the truth, he forced you into it, right? Before I could answer, a cold shadow fell over us. Lucas. He slid between us so smoothly it was almost surgical. Brian stumbled back. Lucas wrapped an arm around my waist, tighter than necessary, and smiled thinly. Brian, he said, so nice to see you. His tone suggested otherwise. Brian chuckled nervously and beat a hasty retreat. When we were alone again, Lucas didn't move his arm. He kept holding me, tight, possessive. I could feel the tension vibrating off him like a live wire. You disappeared, he said, voice dangerously soft. I was right here, I whispered. He didn't answer, just stared at me with an intensity that made my knees weak. Later, when we finally left the gala, the night was cool and quiet. Lucas drove in silence, one hand on the wheel, the other resting casually, but firmly, on my knee. I swallowed hard. I couldn't tell if it was part of the act anymore. Back at my apartment, he walked me to the door. Neither of us moved to unlock it. We just stood there. The tension between us thick enough to drown in. I looked up at him. He looked down at me. The world shrank to just the two of us. Then, without thinking, without planning, Lucas cupped my face and kissed me. It wasn't like the fake affectionate gestures before. This was real, hot, raw, desperate. I melted against him, clutching his jacket, losing myself in the feel of him. He tasted like coffee and danger. And when he finally pulled away, breathing hard, he whispered against my lips. You're mine. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. Forgot everything, the contract, the rules, the lies. I only knew that my heart was no longer pretending. It was his. Completely. For a long moment after Lucas kissed me, neither of us moved. The night air was cold against my flushed skin. I stared up at him, breathing hard, heart hammering against my ribs. Lucas's hands were still cradling my face gently, like he was afraid I might vanish. Maybe I would, because the urge to run had never been stronger. I stammered. Panic flooded me. This wasn't part of the agreement. This wasn't safe. This wasn't fake anymore. And fake was the only thing keeping me sane. I should go, I whispered, pulling back slightly. Lucas's hands dropped, but his eyes stayed locked on mine, sharp, unreadable. He didn't try to stop me. Not physically, but his silence pinned me more effectively than any grip could have. I fumbled with my keys, finally managing to shove them into the lock. The door swung open. I stumbled inside, heart racing, and turned back to face him. He stood there, one hand braced against the doorframe, watching me, waiting. Good night, I croaked, forcing a smile. He nodded once. Good night, Lily. His voice was low, rough. It sounded like goodbye. It scared me more than the kiss. I shut the door and leaned against it, chest heaving. What the hell was I doing? What the hell was he doing? That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the kiss over and over. The way he had held me, the way he had whispered, "You're mine." No pretense, no audience, no witnesses. Just him and me. Maybe it was just heat of the moment, maybe he regretted it already. Maybe tomorrow everything would go back to normal. Professional, distant, safe. Except it didn't. The next morning, Lucas was waiting downstairs when I left for work. Leaning against his car, hands in pockets. Casual, deadly handsome. Like he hadn't shattered every boundary between us just hours ago. Morning, he said, opening the passenger door for me. I hesitated. He arched an eyebrow. Getting cold feet. Mrs. Turner? My face flamed. I climbed into the car wordlessly. The drive to the office was normal. Too normal. Lucas talked about upcoming meetings, project deadlines, quarterly reports. No mention of the kiss. No mention of anything personal. I tried to match his energy, professional, composed, unaffected, but my hands wouldn't stop fidgeting in my lap. At the office, everything felt hyper-aware. Every glance he gave me across the conference table, every brush of his fingers when he handed me a document, every time he said, "Lily," in that low, rough voice that made my toes curl. Nobody else noticed anything, but I felt it. I felt him. Around lunchtime, I finally cracked. I cornered him outside his office. Heart in my throat. "Mr. Turner," I said stiffly, "about last night." He glanced up from his phone. "Yes?" I swallowed hard. "I think we crossed a line." He studied me for a moment. Then he said calmly, "No, we erased it." I stared at him, stunned. He took a step closer. Too close. I backed up instinctively until my back hit the wall. Lucas braced one hand next to my head, trapping me without touching. His voice dropped to a whisper. "I don't want a fake marriage anymore, Lily." My breath caught. He leaned closer, until his forehead rested lightly against mine. "I want all of it." I squeezed my eyes shut. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't safe. If I fell for him, really fell, and he changed his mind later, I would be shattered. "I'm scared," I whispered. It slipped out before I could stop it. Lucas went still. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, very quietly, he murmured, "So am I." I opened my eyes, and for the first time, I saw it. The fear behind his steel-gray gaze. The vulnerability he hid so well. He wasn't invincible. He was just a man. A man who had taken the same terrifying leap I was about to take. Slowly, he reached down and laced our fingers together. Solid, warm, real. "I won't let you fall alone," he said simply. Maybe it was reckless. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe it would end in heartbreak. But in that moment, I decided, if I was going to fall, I was taking him with me. After that night, something shifted between us. Lucas Turner wasn't just my boss anymore or my fake husband. He was something else entirely. Something terrifying. Something precious. It started with small things. He stopped texting me about work after hours. Instead, he sent messages like, "Open black lens bracket, did you eat? Close black lens bracket, open black lens bracket, want me to pick you up? Close black lens bracket, open black lens bracket, the new dessert place opened. Want to try it? Close black lens bracket." Not orders, not obligations. Just him reaching out. Like a man in love. He started picking me up from work even when he didn't have to. Sometimes he'd wait outside the building, leaning against his car, arms crossed. That dangerous smile reserved only for me. My coworkers swooned. Open black lens bracket, OMG, Mrs. Turner is so lucky. Close black lens bracket, open black lens bracket, her husband looks at her like she hung the moon. Close black lens bracket, open black lens bracket, where can I order one Lucas Turner? Please, close black lens bracket. If only they knew. We began having dinner together more often. Sometimes at fancy restaurants, sometimes at tiny noodle shops tucked into alleyways. Lucas didn't care, as long as I was there. He teased me mercilessly. If I dribbled soup down my chin, he'd wipe it off with maddening patience. If I tripped over a sidewalk crack, he'd catch me with one arm and tease me about falling for him again. I wanted to strangle him. Or kiss him. Or both. One Friday night, after a movie date, he walked me to my apartment door. I fumbled with my keys. Flustered. Lucas watched me with open amusement. "You're cute when you're nervous," he said. I dropped the keys. "Smooth, Lily. So smooth." Lucas bent down, picked them up, and held them out. But when I reached for them, he didn't let go. Instead, he pulled me gently toward him. Our bodies brushed. Our breaths mingled. And before I could panic, he kissed me again. Soft, unhurried, certain. Like he had all the time in the world. When we broke apart, I clung to his shirt. Dazed. He chuckled low in his throat. "Invite me in, Mrs. Turner." My heart skittered. "Why, you don't have to call me that," I mumbled. He tilted his head, mock confused. "But you are Mrs. Turner and you're mine." His voice was rough, possessive. It sent shivers down my spine. I unlocked the door with trembling fingers. Lucas followed me inside, shutting the door behind him with a soft click. He didn't pounce, didn't rush. Instead, he guided me to the couch, sat me down, and simply held me. One strong arm around my shoulders, one hand tangled in my hair. As if he couldn't believe I was real. As if he didn't trust himself not to lose me if he let go. We stayed like that for a long time. No words. No expectations. Just breathing together in the quiet. It was the safest I had ever felt in my life. Later, when he finally left, he kissed my forehead and whispered, "Sweet dreams, Mrs. Turner." And for the first time in a long time, I knew they would be. The next morning, a knock on my apartment door woke me up. I stumbled to open it. Still half asleep, Lucas stood there, holding 2 cups of coffee and a brown paper bag. He didn't say anything, just held them out. Breakfast, he said simply. I blinked. You brought me breakfast? He arched an eyebrow. You thought marriage came without perks? I laughed, took the coffee, and stepped aside to let him in. We sat on the couch, eating quietly, comfortable, easy. Every so often, Lucas would reach over and brush crumbs from the corner of my mouth. Like he couldn't help himself. Like touching me had become second nature. Halfway through our meal, he set his coffee down and turned serious. Lily, he said. I froze. I knew that tone. The serious business tone. I want to discuss the contract. My heart lurched. Here it was. The expiration date. The moment he told me our deal was ending. That he didn't need me anymore. That everything, the kisses, the touches, the tender moments, had just been pretend. I steeled myself. Of course, I said lightly, terms and conditions. Right, are you terminating early? Lucas frowned. No. I blinked. Extending it. Then? He shook his head. Slow, firm. I'm canceling it. My chest tightened painfully. I tried to smile. Right. Makes sense. We don't need a contract anymore. Lucas cut me off. Because I'm rewriting it. I blinked. What? He pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket. Placed it carefully on the coffee table. I stared at it. New contract? New terms? New expiration date? Hands trembling, I unfolded it. And froze. It wasn't a contract. It was a marriage license application. A real one. No expiration date. No termination clauses. Just one line that said, Spouse, Lucas Turner, and a blank space next to it. Waiting for my name. I looked up, wide-eyed. Lucas's expression was steady, unwavering. I don't want a temporary wife. Lily, he said quietly. I don't want a fake marriage, I want the real thing with you. I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. Words failed me. Tears burned my eyes. He reached across the table, covering my shaking hand with his. I'm scared too, he said softly, but if I have to be afraid for the rest of my life. I want to be afraid with you. I let out a watery laugh. You're terrible at proposals. He smirked. I'm a businessman, not a poet. I wiped my eyes. Then I picked up the pen. And signed my name. Clear, bold, certain. Lucas let out a breath I hadn't realized he was holding. Then he leaned over the table and kissed me. Slow, deep, full of promise. When we finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine. No refunds, he whispered. I smiled through my tears. No returns either. Outside, the city buzzed with life. Inside, my world shrank to one man. One choice. One forever. And for once, forever didn't scare me at all.